Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. I am intentionally encouraged when I see people doing business the right way. And for the last 15 years, Damon Burton and his team at SEO National have done just that. Now you might say, Brian, what can they do for me in my business? I'm going to tell you what they can do for you. They can help you understand search engine optimization. There are a lot of players out there in the marketplace, but you want a team of people that are going to be dedicated to working with you and helping you to understand search engine optimization and how you can show up higher on search engines so that you can bring more revenue into your business. Damon and his team are full of integrity, honesty, decency, and trust. And if that's important to you and that encourages you, I would encourage you to give them a call today at 855-736-6285 or go to SEOnational.com and get a free quote and tell them you heard about it on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Get ready for a dynamite conversation coming up right now on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. Hey, new background, new virtual background. Got to give a shout out to my man, Tony Swisher, for hooking us up with this new background. And I'll let you know how you can get involved with Tony and his company. But what an honor it is for me today to spend some time with an old friend. And I don't say old as in, you know, he and I are both in the over 50 club, but he's a dear friend. Tom and I worked together at a company for about 15, 16 months, had a lot of conversations about life and football. He's a diehard Pittsburgh Steelers fan. I don't hold that against him because he's still a great guy. But it is an honor to have my friend Tom Willoughby joining me, and this is going to be a two-part episode. Because in the second part, Tom is going to talk about his near-death experience that he had just a few weeks ago and how that changed him. But I want to get some insight from him on some other things. So my friend Tom Willoughby joins me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Tom, this is so cool. Thank you for joining me today. How are you?
I am doing well, doing really well. And I am just as excited to spend some time with you and catch up with you and talk about what all's been going on and everything. And yeah, we'll hit some stuff in the second part, but I am literally just happy to be here.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you know, the cool thing about it is, and I've said this to you privately, and now I'm going to say it to you publicly. When we worked together, you were the CFO of a company that you and I were a part of. Your door was always open. That's what I loved about working with you was I would come into the office on Fridays. I would come to Point Pleasant, West Virginia, where you and I both worked. Your door was always open, and I loved that about you. Where did that leadership style for you come from in being so accessible to people? Let's start there because – you know, in this new environment where everybody wants to work remotely and things like that, you don't get that one-on-one interpersonal relationship with folks anymore. Where for you being accessible to your people, where did that start with you?
Gosh, I don't know. I'm going to go all the way back to, you know, coaches change lives. And I remember when I was in high school, I had a football coach, our head coach, Don Van Meter, who actually passed away about 2 years ago from COVID. And that man had a huge influence on me. But one of the things that he was that way, and he always made time to talk to you, and he always made time to talk to me. And I was this is a small town in West Virginia, single A football. So we are not a powerhouse. We're not a hotbed of Division I talent. And even by those standards, I was a marginal athlete at best. But he always spent time with me. And he was the first person outside of my immediate family that ever really believed in me. And he was always taking time to talk to me. And he was always talking to me about individual things, about what I individually needed to be doing to get better. And he kept talking to me about it and saying, yeah, you can do this. You can do this. You do this and this, and you'll be able to play on the varsity, and you'll be a starter. He had that one-on-one interaction with me and always made time for me. And it was one of the first people to believe in me. And that kind of has had a huge influence that I could talk about for a long time, but encouraging me and believing in me and the work that I put in, and those two things, because his belief in me eventually became belief in myself, and belief in myself and work ethic have done so much for me. But somebody had to take the time and invest in me, and that's what he did. And so I've always tried to pay that forward by always making time to talk to people.
Well, and what I loved about that too was no topic was off limits with you. And you know, I can remember coming in and I would just kind of knock on your door, and it was so cool no matter what you were working on, or if you said, hey, I don't have time to talk to you right now, come back and see me in an hour. Come back. That's what always struck me about you, Tom, was the fact that even if you didn't have time to talk, you made time to talk. And let's face it, there were times that you had deadlines that you had to get stuff done. You had reports you had to do. I mean, you were running a multi-million-dollar company from the financial side of things and making sure that all the pieces needed to fall in place and things like that. You talk about your coach and the self-belief and things like that. When you transitioned into the business world, what other lessons did Coach Van Meter share with you that helped you really, as you got into the business world, you started running these large companies like that? What other things helped you along from that experience with Coach Van Meter?
Well, the work ethic and the belief in yourself were two of the big ones. I also have to say there was another coach, and again, coaches change lives. They really do. We had I guess you should call it an offensive coordinator. He taught me many lessons, but one of them was, and I'm going to do a compare and contrast. When I was in junior high, we played against a team that had a lot bigger enrollment than we did, and they absolutely just beat us like a drum. And I remember my parents consoling me after the game saying, you know, you guys have 25 kids on your team and they've got 50 kids, and you guys really shouldn't be playing them. You should be playing people your own size, and you shouldn't feel bad about it. They've got a lot bigger pool of kids to draw talent from and everything. And when I met Coach Rick Northrup, he taught me a completely different way of thinking. He taught me that not only was it capable to beat those people, it was expected because we were better than they were. And he taught us many things, everything from teamwork and attention to detail was a big thing. And again, work ethic too, and how to be a motivator and how to be a leader with the things he would say to you. And I can say that junior high team that I was on, that was the last time we ever lost to that school. We beat them every time I played them from then on. But he taught me a different way of thinking, and things like a kid growing up in a small town, West Virginia, and going to Pittsburgh and working for one of the big four accounting firms, or becoming a chief financial officer of one of the largest regional pharmacy chains in the United States. He taught me a different way of thinking, to think that's not beyond your reach. That's not beyond your grasp, that you can achieve these things and you can do these things. And it was just teaching us a different mindset to say, don't think any dream is too big, that you can achieve it, that it's capable. It happens to people like you. It's within your grasp. So I got to give credit to both those people. But I go back to every time I hear somebody say coaches change lives, I'm like, you don't have to tell me. I know.
Well, and again, you being a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, lifelong, I'm a lifelong Bengals fan. I can't stand the Steelers twice a year. Yeah, I can't stand them. The two times we played, it was so good to see the butt kicking the Bengals gave them last year. Of course, the first game of the season, Pittsburgh, Chris Boswell hit a bomb and beat him at the end, and so. But I have a ton of respect for Mike Tomlin. So much respect for Mike Tomlin, because the one thing that you can say about Mike Tomlin, you talk about coaches changing lives. Mike Tomlin is the epitome of consistency for an NFL coach. His press conferences are the same. His sideline demeanor is the same. You could go back and pull a tape out from 2010 and pull a tape out from this year, 2022, and it's probably the same demeanor, same press conference, same everything. He's consistent. That's what amazes me about great coaches is the consistency that they build. And, you know, it doesn't surprise me that Mike Tomlin's not had a losing season since he's been the head coach of the Pittsburgh Steelers. It doesn't surprise me a bit. The talent all changes. The consistency doesn't. When you think about those coaches, how important was consistency when you think back to what they did and how they taught and how they coached? How important was consistency?
You know, it was really important because you knew what to expect and you knew what was expected of you. And I think going along with consistency is communication. They came in the door every day with the same attitude. And the attitude was, we're going to put our work in today and it's going to pay off for us on Friday night. And when we say we're going to put our work in, we're not just talking about it. It's going to be hard work, but it's also going to be a lot of attention to detail. I mean, I remember it was everything from the way you lined up in your stance to the way you carried out your fakes to, you know, the way you understood the other team's formations and what our adjustments to them were. It was very much a consistent approach and a high level of attention to detail. Those are two of the big things I take out of it.
Well, and again, those things don't happen by accident. You're teaching your players to do that. I don't care if you're talking about the junior high level of football all the way to the National Football League. If you want somebody to execute something, you have to teach it.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. Prices are going up by the day. We've got to find ways to increase our household revenue. Now, a couple ways you could do that is, one, you could go and ask your boss for a raise. But if that doesn't work, I've got another way for you. It's my friend Joe Hart's program called Products for Profit. Joe's been a guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast and told his story about how learning retail arbitrage changed his life, and he's been helping thousands of people change theirs. Now, retail arbitrage is simply this. It's taking a product and buying it and then reselling it online for a higher price, and you keep the profits. And guess what? Amazon and Walmart use third-party resellers every day to fulfill their customer orders. I want you to go to productsforprofit.com or productsforprofit.card.co. Get connected to Joe's team. Tell them you heard about it on the Intentional Encourager podcast and start making money today with Products for Profit. And now let's get back to more great conversation on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
You have to make it happen. You know, Tom, let me pivot here for just a second. During the pandemic, a lot of things changed about work and things like that. I've been asking this question now for 2+ years as I've done this podcast. Tell me the biggest takeaway that you've had from the last couple of years, whether it's personally, professionally, and we can. I want to do it before your heart attack, because obviously that's been a total game changer, to use a sports cliche. But as you navigated through the pandemic and things like that, personally and professionally, what was the biggest lesson that you learned that you'll carry from it going forward?
Well, I'm going to turn this around a little bit and say it was one of the biggest lessons I tried to teach, because with my kids, I try to never let a moment pass where there's a teaching moment. Okay. And if you go all the way back to when this pandemic started, it was supposed to be a 2-week thing. It was going to be 2 weeks to flatten out the curve. Okay. So everybody was preparing to hunker down for 2 weeks. I got my kids together, and we live in a little subdivision here, and I took them with me, and we walked around all of our neighbors' houses before the pandemic was starting, when they were announcing that we were kind of going to do this shutdown for 2 weeks, to tell them that if they needed anything, we were around, that we had plenty of food, we had whatever, if they needed gasoline for their car, if they needed whatever, that we were stocked up, we were ready, and we were there to help them if they needed anything. And we went around to every neighbor and did that. And I tried to talk to my kids about this as a life lesson. And I said, look, when things are at their worst is when you need to be at your best. Some of these neighbors we know really well. Some of them, we wave to them, we see them on the street, but we don't really talk to them that much. But we made a point of going up to their house and telling them, if you need us, we're here for you. And teaching that lesson to my kids, that when times are tough, that's when people need to pull together, not pull apart. And when times are tough, that's when you need to be at your best. But I tried to really use that pandemic as a teaching moment. And that's one of the things that I will probably take away from it, is how we handled it at the start, and what I tried to use it to instill some good values in my kids.
Well, and you know what, Tom, that's a really good point, because again, life, we were just talking about football, talk about the ultimate adversity sport, right? I mean, football to me is the ultimate adversity sport, because you're constantly at battle with your opponent. The offensive linemen are battling the defensive linemen for both teams. Linebackers are trying to block tight ends, trying to block running backs. People are trying to take, blitzing and things like that. It's the ultimate adversity sport. And yet we faced big time adversity as a country and as a community and things like that. And people would say to us, well, you guys live in West Virginia. How did the pandemic affect you guys? And I, again, Tom, I don't think we were as bad off as most people were, just because we've got a population of 1.8 million people in the state. I mean, and I told people, I'm like, it's not bad here. There's nobody here, but it's not bad here, because, we can go to the grocery store, we can get the things we need and things like that. I want to pivot. You were talking about being prepared. So I want to tap into your financial mind for just a few minutes, because I really feel like there's some great encouragement that people can take in, some lessons from it. You managed large size. You mentioned a couple of the things that you did. What is the number one hallmark that good companies do to be prepared? And maybe there's a small business owner that's listening to us right now, and they're saying, hey, I learned during the pandemic X, and I'm going to be prepared. They may not manage like you had $150 million worth of business, or manage, a couple $100 million worth of business as you've done in your career. How do companies stay prepared to handle these types of situations?
That's I'm going to tell you, there's two things that I say. Okay. I always say running a company is not about being like Bill Gates and founding Microsoft in the late 70s and early 80s and having one brilliant idea about how to revolutionize something. There are companies like Microsoft that did that, but that's not how most companies operate. Okay. Most companies operate by, you show up every day, you work hard, and you make good decisions. And by making good decisions, you say, I'm going to collect whatever facts I can about it. I'm going to weigh all of my options. I'm going to look at all the relevant facts, and I'm going to make what looks to be like the most sound, logical decision here. I'm not going to take wild chances, and I'm not going to do something because it's a gut instinct. I'm going to rely on data and facts and say, this is how we're going to do it, because that to me is the best way to just long-term manage a business. The other thing is, you always have to look for opportunities, because as I say, almost look for an unmet need and fill that need. So every day, besides doing the basics of the business, look for an unmet need and fill that need. And without divulging anything confidential, one of the big things that we did when we were at the pharmacy was, there were some independent grocery stores who felt like they needed to have a pharmacy in their grocery store to compete with the Krogers and the Walmarts, because they felt like they were losing business because people would go get their prescription filled at a big chain grocery store and do
Yeah.
their grocery shop there. They needed that to meet, but they didn't know how to run a pharmacy. We partnered with them and started putting pharmacies in grocery stores. That was an opportunity. That was an unmet need, and that helped the business grow, helped it prosper. But
Which,
that's one
Tom,
example,
let me jump in here. Forgive me for jumping in here, but to give folks some clarity around that. So, if you're in a larger metropolitan area, like I'm in the Oklahoma City area as we record this, you have a lot of grocery store chains that aren't national chains that probably have pharmacies in every one of their grocery stores. Where we live in West Virginia, that wasn't the case. It was Kroger, Walmart, and that's it. That really was it as far as grocery stores. And I love what you were saying there, because people would probably take that and they would go, well, wait a minute. How in the world do you have a grocery store without a pharmacy in it? That would be like a foreign concept to those people. So that's why I wanted to jump in there with that. And Tom, it's brilliant because it goes back to what you were saying a couple of minutes ago about the unmet need and looking for that opportunity to fulfill that need. And again, it gave that independent grocery store the opportunity to compete, which is what every small business needs, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, most small businesses will tell you, I just want a level playing field. Give me a level playing field and I'll be able to compete with anybody. And that was one way of leveling the playing field by adding one of the services that they didn't offer that a big box store did.
Well, and I'll tell you something too, and as I hearken back on our time together with the pharmacy that we worked for, the pharmacy chain we worked for, I remember a conversation you and I had one day, and you came to me and you said, what do you need? You said to me, what do you need to be more successful? And I always admired and appreciated that, because a lot of times leaders will not ask that question of their team. They'll just say, why aren't you more successful with the resources that we've given you? We've given you X, Y, and Z. How come you're not successful? I always appreciate, and I never got a chance to tell you, because it was great vision on your part to go, you're out here killing yourself, but you need something else. And I never will forget that conversation we had in your office that you said, I'm going to give you some extra resources that you need to make this more successful. When you look at companies that are resource heavy,
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton. You know, dreams are powerful pieces of intentional encouragement. We all have them. If you're a business owner, you've probably always dreamed of taking your sales to levels you've never seen before. I've got a guy that can help you with that. His name is Brad Norwood. My good buddy Brad has been on the Intentional Encourager podcast as a guest before, and he is a dream specialist. His company, Dream It Pro, offers incentive packages to travel to places such as the Masters, Kentucky Derby, the Super Bowl, even exotic places that you've always wanted to take your team, but you just didn't know how to do it. Brad's your guy. And oh, by the way, Brad's a certified bucket list coach, so he can help your team members achieve their personal dreams as well. I want you to go to www.dreamitpro.com and find out more, or call him directly at 479-466-6907. And by the way, tell him you heard it on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Let's get back to more great conversation here on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
What keeps them from going to the next level? Is it not using resources properly? Because there would be some companies that would say, or small businesses out there, Tom, they would say, well, if I had X amount of dollars of capital, I could do this, 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 and this. And it's not that they need more capital. They've got plenty of capital. They need to allocate that capital in the right way. When you look at a situation like that, what's the one thing typically that those businesses are really missing? It's not capital. What is it that they're missing?
It probably varies a lot business to business, but one of the things that you talk about that conversation is, I always say, if you're a leader in a business and you're working with people around you, you can either set them up for success or you can set them up for failure. And I always wanted to say, obviously you want to set people up for success, but sometimes you have to ask them what they need to succeed. Sometimes what you think they need to succeed isn't what they need at all. And you are out knocking on the doors of doctors' offices, and I don't know anything about how you sell stuff to doctors or how you get in their office or what you do. So I'm not going to pretend to think that I know what you need to succeed. I'm going to ask you and say, what do you need to succeed? If it's within my power to get it to you, I will. One of the things that I think is that I have learned is you got to surround yourself with good people. And that's probably one of the things that a lot of small businesses struggle with is finding and recruiting good people. And I think that is a big thing. And I think sometimes they think some of these people are out of their reach. And again, I would say they're probably not. You look at that little regional chain in West Virginia that we worked for. Yeah. We had people there that were from Kmart's corporate office and from Walgreens corporate office. And we had some pretty big hitters that we were able to recruit away from there and come work for us. But the big thing that I think a lot of businesses need is you need good people around you.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the big keys. You got to have good people, and then you got to try to set them up for success.
We had talented people. There was no question. And I would not consider myself a part of that. There were talented people that were already there when I walked in the door, yourself included, that were just, to your point, were incredible people. And Tom, I love what you said there about you think that great people are out of your reach, but it feels like small businesses and even some mid-sized businesses go, well, I can't afford this person. This is the guy I really want, but I can't afford this. Or this is the gal I really want, but I can't afford him. And I tell people all the time, there's never been a better time to be a free agent. This is the absolute best time to declare yourself a free agent. I want to finish this part of this conversation with this question, and you're absolutely the right person to ask this question. Give me the single best piece of advice you've ever gotten in business.
Oh, man. The single best piece of advice. Probably the single best piece of advice I ever got is somebody told me one time, and I don't know the exact wording, but I'll paraphrase here if I can. Sometimes the best deals you make are the ones you walk away from. So sometimes the best decisions you make are not the ones where you closed a big deal or bought something or took a new job or did whatever. It's the ones you walk away from. Don't discount the fact that there's a lot to be said for walking away from the wrong opportunity or bypassing something that's not right for you. One of the things I see businesses do a lot is they want to go out and they want to do something because they think it's going to make a big splash, or they think this is going to be big, or they think it's going to take them to the next level, and they're doing it for the sake of, I don't want to say ego, but they're doing it for the sake of making a big splash, and really they'd be better off walking away from it. But that's probably the single best advice is sometimes the best decisions you make are the ones you walk away from.
Man, I love that. And it goes right back to what we were talking about with the sports analogies. Sometimes the best trades you make are the ones you don't. Yeah. And that I love that. And
yeah. Well, and going back to sports, sometimes the best play a quarterback makes is the pass he throws out of bounds.
Yeah, or taking a sack. Yeah,
or taking a sack. It's
the one
he didn't throw.
Well, and that's 100% right. And everybody was killing Joe Burrow and the Bengals offensive line last year, and it was the fact that, and he was like, look, it's not their fault. I'm holding the ball because I don't want to make a mistake with the ball. And it was like, yeah, I don't want you to do that. And, again, Tom, this is such a great time in our country's history this has never been a better time for small businesses, I don't believe. And you've given them some incredible advice. If somebody wants to reach out to you and they love what you've talked about so far, how can folks reach out to you, kind of pick your brain, get some leadership wisdom from you? Tell folks how they can connect with you.
Well, you can reach me. You can always email me, tom.willoughby, WILLOUGHBY at 340b-max.com. And my company has a website, 340b-max.com, and there's a way there to contact me. Those are the two ways. And then I'm on Facebook. I don't do Instagram and I don't do Twitter, but I am on Facebook, Tom Willoughby. But I always enjoy these conversations like this. And going back to something you said earlier, there's conversations we used to have in my office. I'm telling you what, I think I got more out of them than you did. And we talked as much about life as we did about business. But I got at least as much out of them, if not more, than you did. So I enjoyed them too.
Yeah, those were good times, and I do miss those days, and those were great times. But it's led to this conversation here. And again, you gotta stay for part 2. Because Tom's going to tell his story. Tom 7 weeks ago overcame something pretty powerful, and we're going to talk about that. Tom, I can't wait for part 2 of this conversation. So appreciate you joining me on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And of course, the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through his word. If you're not subscribed to the Intentional Encourager podcast, hit the subscribe button wherever you get podcasts so you don't miss an exciting episode where you can get encouraged and stay encouraged. And remember, anyone, anywhere, at any time, any place can be an intentional encourager.